In light of this, frankly, terrifying executive order, let's talk about the U.S. psychiatric facility that was known as the Dachau for queers, specifically queer men, Atascadero State Hospital in California. Welcome back to Yesterqueers. My name's Amanda, and I'm a public historian of queer history. Obviously, we're going to be discussing a difficult topic today, so deep breath. The year is 1954, and the Lavender Scare is in full swing. Thousands of people have had their lives and careers upended by the federal witch hunt for homosexuals, and Eisenhower has signed an executive order banning homosexuals from working for the federal government. Homosexuality is classed as a psychiatric disorder, and sodomy is illegal in every state. In California, men classified as sexual psychopaths can be given indefinite sentences to psychiatric facilities without trial, being released only when the institution deems that they are no longer a danger to the public. Enter Atascadero State Hospital, a 1,200-bed, state-run forensic psychiatric facility for men that billed itself as the only institution in the world to specialize in treating sexual deviants. This was a time in California's history when the state government was very focused on rehabilitating criminals, and Atascadero was the next evolution in the state's attempt to reform sexual psychopaths, a broad legal definition established by California's Sexual Psychopath Act in 1939. The inmate population for the first 20 years or so was a mix of violent criminals, including those who preyed on children, nonviolent criminals like peeping toms, and gay and bisexual men and teenage boys. Whatever awful things you're imagining could happen at a facility like this probably happened at Atascadero. By the late 1960s, stories were beginning to trickle out, not just from former inmates, but also from staff about the horrific and barbaric treatments that the inmates were subjected to. They endured electroconvulsive shock therapy, aversion therapy, solitary confinement, and a host of other so-called treatments that amounted to nothing more than torture. In one absolutely bizarre case, a psychiatrist insisted on oil wrestling with the inmates so that they could prove to him that their impulses were well controlled. In 1971, Dr. Walter Freeman, the father of the lobotomy, said in a press conference that he had severed the frontal lobes of several homosexual inmates at Atascadero. The facility was even exposed for using a drug called succinylcholine on its inmates. This is a drug that used to be part of general anesthesia, but when administered on its own, it paralyzes the patient and leaves them fully conscious, convinced that they're drowning because their lungs are also paralyzed. In addition to the emotional trauma of this experience, prolonged use can cause permanent brain damage. The doctors who developed this treatment were so proud of it that they called it a study and wrote a paper about it. When Dr. Paul F. Bramwell was confronted about his use of this fright drug to torture patients, his response was, "These men have no rights. If we can learn something by using them, then that is small compensation for the trouble they have caused society." When Dr. Grant H. Morris, a legal scholar who focuses on the intersection of mental health and law, visited Atascadero, the LA Free Press quoted him as saying, "The experiments were conducted in apparent violation of the Nuremberg Code, the Declaration of Helsinki, and the AMA's 1966 ethical guidelines for clinical investigation." Whistleblowers reported all of this to the State Department of Mental Hygiene, but nothing changed until Dr. Michael Serber was hired as the research director at Atascadero in 1970. He went to the national press to expose the abuses happening at Atascadero and forced the state to reckon with what was going on at its facility. He ended the use of succinylcholine and other drugs that were being used to torture and control inmates, and he advocated for the rights of the patients, especially queer men. Dr. Serber was straight, but he didn't think that queer men needed to be treated because he didn't think that homosexuality was a disorder. Serber unfortunately died in 1974 after a brief battle with cancer, but he made massive changes to the facility in the few years that he was there. Atascadero State Hospital is still in operation today. That's it for today. As always, more information, including sources and further reading, is available in the usual place.